Amid the shimmering lights of La Fontaine restaurant, where the powerful and wealthy often visit, an unexpected story took place. Emma, a quiet waitress with big dreams in her eyes, had no idea that tonight her life would change forever. Richard Carter, a millionaire known for his arrogance and penchant for mocking the weak, chose Emma as the target of his cruel entertainment. But in that very moment, when all eyes were on her in defiance and derision, Emma stood up, not with anger or protest, but with the language of her heart, music. And in just a few minutes, her fingers on the keys changed not only the room, but also the way people perceive the power of a person who dares to dream and live true to themselves. Please join us in listening to this story. Emma, 25 years old, is a waitress at La Fontaine, the most luxurious restaurant in the city. With a gentle smile and eyes that always sparkle with dreaminess, she is more than just an ordinary waitress. Behind her apron and her busy steps, Emma keeps a big dream: to become a pianist. Since she was a little girl living in a small town, music has been the place she turned to when life got difficult. An old piano, given to her by a kind neighbor, became her closest friend. Without going through any classes, Emma taught herself every note, every piece of classical music and old books she accidentally found. It was not only about learning, but also about how she engraved her dream deep in her heart. However, life doesn't always allow Emma to pursue the things she desires. Her mother, a single woman, worked tirelessly to support the family. Late at night, the light from the small kitchen was still on, where her mother diligently calculated every penny to be enough to take care of Emma and her siblings. Seeing her mother struggling like that, Emma could not selfishly think for herself. She was forced to put aside her professional music dreams to support her family. The late nights practicing on the old piano gradually gave way to the hustle and bustle of making a living. But the love for music still burned deep in her heart. When she moved to the big city, Emma found a job at La Fontaine, not only because this place brings a good income to help her maintain her life, but also because of a very special reason. The piano is located in the corner of the restaurant. Every time she quietly passed that corner of the room, Emma's eyes stopped at the piano, feeling like she was seeing a part of her dream, even from afar. Rarely does she get a chance to touch it, but just knowing that the guitar is there, the music is still closer to her than ever. Every day working at La Fontaine for Emma is not only a job to make a living, but also every step on a silent journey closer to her dream. When the restaurant was empty, she sometimes secretly put her hand on the keyboard, just to feel the familiarity and comfort of the music. And even though life is difficult, in her eyes, the fire of desire still shines. For Emma, music never really left her. It was just waiting for a chance to catch fire. One bustling evening at La Fontaine, the atmosphere suddenly changed when Richard Carter, a wealthy businessman known for his arrogance and power, entered the restaurant. His appearance always attracts all eyes, not only because of his perfectly tailored suits or flashy companions, but also because of the complacent aura that exudes from every gesture. Not only is Richard wealthy, but he also enjoys using that wealth to highlight himself, often turning others into entertainment tools in his cruel pastimes. When Richard sat down, his eyes scanned the room as if searching for a new target. Just a few seconds later, he stopped at Emma, the young waitress who was busy between tables with a tray of drinks in her hand. It's unclear what it is about her that attracts his attention. Perhaps it's her simple appearance, her modest smile, or the way she appears unfazed by his powerful presence. A smirk appeared on Richard's face, and he began a plan that caught the entire room's attention. "Emma, right?" Richard spoke loudly, cutting through the gentle noise of the restaurant. She stopped, a bit surprised to see him looking at her, but quickly smiled professionally. "A beautiful name," he said, but his tone held no respect. "You must be someone with many hidden talents." The whole table laughed, laughter mixed with a bit of mockery. Emma tried to stay calm, responded with a polite nod, and walked away. But Richard hasn't stopped yet. When she returned with the tray of drinks, he continued, "I heard you play the piano. It's interesting. How about you give us a performance right now?" Emma paused, confusion evident on her face. "I don't think it's appropriate, sir," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice calm. But Richard paid no attention to that polite refusal. He laughed loudly, his laughter echoed throughout the room, and his voice became higher and clearer. "Come on, don't be shy. A real talent is not afraid of the audience. Or are you just saying it for fun?" Laughter erupted from his table, and the eyes of the other customers in the restaurant gradually turned to Emma. Surrounded by stares and ridicule, Emma felt like she was isolated in the middle of a large room. The contrast becomes stark between Richard, a powerful man with wealth, influence, and the approval of a group of laughing companions, and the serving girl, just an ordinary employee, trying to make ends meet. While Richard uses his dominance and status to taunt, she appears timid, shy, and a little scared, like a small person placed in a spotlight she did not expect. Want. That moment highlights the disparity not only in status, but also in emotion. Richard's ease and complacency stand in stark contrast to her timidity and fragility. Emma tried to regain her composure, repeating her refusal with a polite smile, but her voice trailed off somewhat. "I'm just here to do my job, sir." Richard leaned back, took a sip of wine, and smirked. "I see," he said, deliberately keeping his tone provocative. "There's just no real talent to show for it." That statement was like a slap to Emma's self-esteem. She felt her hands clench around the tray, but his words still echoed in her head. No real talent. Those words, not only a contempt, but also a challenge. Looking into Richard's arrogant eyes, Emma knew that if she left now, she would forever be considered weak, unworthy of respect. A strong will rose within her, and for the first time, Emma decided she would not let herself become anyone's joke. "Okay," she said, her voice not loud, but loud enough for the whole table to hear. Her eyes were steady as she looked straight at Richard. "If you want a show, I'll give it to you." The room fell silent, and all eyes were now on Emma as she walked towards the piano, walking slowly but surely. Richard was still leaning back in his chair, a smug smile on his face, unaware of what he was about to witness. In the soft light of the chandelier, Emma walked slowly toward the grand piano in the corner of La Fontaine restaurant. The room was quiet. All eyes were on her. Richard, looking smug, leaned back in his chair, his arrogant smile still evident. Emma's legs were a bit shaky, but in her mind, her mother's words always echoed, "Don't let anyone make you feel small." Emma sat down in front of the piano, placing her hands on the cold keys. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes, concentrating all her emotions. Her fingers began to glide gently across the keys, echoing the first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune. The sound was initially small and fragile, but quickly rose into a symphony of emotions. The melody crept throughout the room, each note telling Emma's own story. Her mother's sacrifices, the long nights practicing on the old piano, and her once-deferred dream. The guests, who had previously been indifferent spectators, now sat motionless, completely captivated by her music. An elderly woman quickly wiped away her tears. A couple held each other's hands tightly, quietly immersed in each melody. When the music reached its climax, the room seemed to completely stop breathing. Emma is no longer a simple waitress, but becomes a true artist. Each key is a piece of her soul, blending into space, making everything around her disappear. And then the last notes rang out, as gentle as the morning light. Emma kept her hand on the keyboard. The space remained silent, as if everyone needed a moment to fully feel the echoes of the music. Applause exploded, first from one corner of the room, then spreading everywhere. A few guests stood up. Cheers rang out. Everyone's face shone with admiration. Emma stood up and bowed gently. In her eyes was confidence, strength, but not a bit of arrogance. Richard, who had intentionally humiliated her, sat silently, with a surprised look on his face. The smug smile disappeared long ago, replaced by a confused look. He awkwardly clapped his hands, but his reluctance was evident. His power and arrogance were meaningless in the face of Emma's talent and determination. Emma walked away from the piano, head held high, walking past admiring eyes and endless applause. It was not just a victory, but a moment when she proved that her value could not be underestimated. Emma is more than just a waitress. She is an artist, someone with a strong dream and the ability to make it happen. Emma gently bowed to the audience. Her cheeks were slightly red, but her eyes shone with a confidence she had never felt before. The room, once a place of frivolous conversations and judgmental looks, was now filled with respect. The eyes that were once indifferent or curious now become admiring and sympathetic. An older woman walked up to her, took her hand, and whispered, "You are extraordinary. Thank you for sharing this beautiful gift with us." An elderly man at another table nodded at Emma and said loudly, "Your music reminds me why we need dreams." Compliments flowed one after another from customers who had previously paid no attention to her, now stopping just to shake hands or say a word of encouragement. Emma's colleagues, standing silently in the corner of the room, exchanged proud looks. A young waitress whispered, "I have never seen guests here like this. You really changed the atmosphere of the whole room." Meanwhile, Richard Carter, who was once full of complacency and arrogance, sat quietly by his chair. He didn't say a word. His mocking smile had long since disappeared. His gaze, usually a place of control and power, was now confused and empty. He awkwardly clapped his hands as the cheers subsided, but it was only a weak clap, unable to hide his defeat. His companions, who had laughed loudly when he taunted Emma, now bowed their heads in silence, not daring to look directly at her. Richard finally stood up, signaling his group to leave. No more loud words or arrogant gestures. He walked out of the restaurant in silence, his back seemingly smaller than when he entered. The guests in the room continued to look, but no one said anything. All attention was still focused on Emma, who was still standing there, her eyes shining with intense belief. Emma returned to work, continuing to walk between the tables. But every step she takes is different now. She was no longer the quiet waitress in the darkness of the restaurant. She realized that her talent, the music she had spent her whole life cultivating, was something no one could deny or take away. The compliments from customers are not only recognition, but also a reminder that her dreams, even if delayed, are still worth pursuing. When the night ended, Emma stood again at the piano, her fingers lightly brushing the keys once more. In her mind, everything that had happened appeared. She smiled, not because she humiliated Richard or surprised everyone, but because she understood more clearly than ever that her value was never about what other people thought. That value lies in her talent and determination. She whispered softly, as if telling herself, "I'm not just a waitress. I'm an artist." For the first time in many years, Emma felt truly confident, not because she wanted to prove anything to others, but because she had proven the most important thing, to herself. Her talent is genuine, and her music is a language capable of moving anyone who will listen. Emma realized that she did not need to wait for one day to be recognized, because her value had always existed from the first day she put her hands on the keyboard. And then, with eyes toward the future, Emma left the restaurant, carrying with her the belief that her dream was closer than ever. Emma had just finished her performance when an elegant man walked up. He introduced himself as David Marshall, a music producer from Nashville, and couldn't hide his admiration. He said, "I was here tonight, and I have to say your performance really amazed me. Her music is not only beautiful, but also contains genuine emotions, something this world desperately needs." Emma was briefly surprised, but quickly smiled. David continued, "I can't promise you instant fame, but I'd like to invite you to record a demo. This is an opportunity, a first step, for her to bring her music to more people." Emma was touched, her eyes shining with a confidence she had never had before. She replied, her voice firm but filled with gratitude, "Thank you very much. I will not disappoint you." When she returned home, Emma sat down in front of the old piano, the keys worn with age, and played a familiar tune. Each note sounded, bringing her back to her thoughts about what had just happened. Richard Carter, the man who once despised and ridiculed her, is no longer something that bothers her. He not only represents arrogance, but also all the obstacles, doubts, and judgments she has faced. But Emma knew that she had won, not with anger or retaliation, but with her own talent, sincerity, and determination. Emma realized that her talent was not only something she loved, but also something no one could deny. The audience's applause, their admiring eyes, and even Richard's confusion were proof of her worth. She doesn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore, except herself. David Marshall doesn't offer an immediate life-changing opportunity, but his invitation is a door, and Emma is ready to walk through it. It was not only a step forward in her music career, but also a step forward in her own self-confidence. For her, the dream is no longer a distant thing, but a journey that is gradually being realized. Every melody she plays, every key she touches, is a reminder that true strength lies in the faith and passion she maintains. Deborah's story is not only an inspirational moment, but also a reminder of the power of passion and courage. If this story touches you, please share the video to spread this positive message to more people. Don't forget to click like to support us and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories about resilience and overcoming in life. Let's create a community that always encourages and empowers dreams.